In the shadowed corners of medieval Europe, the night was not a time for sleep. It was a time for survival. When the sun sank beyond the hills and the last candle flickered out, villagers whispered prayers under their breath. They feared the nocturnals, ancient demons that crept from the forests to feed on the terror of the living. It was said these creatures had once been human, cursed for betraying sacred oaths. Their bodies were twisted, their eyes burned like dying coals, and their whisper carried the scent of rot. They could not enter homes unless someone looked at them directly, so villagers nailed iron crosses to doors and sealed their windows tight. Old Haley spoke of a blacksmith who dared to challenge the superstition. He claimed no demon could harm a man of faith. That very night, his forge was found cold, his tools scattered, and his doors splintered from the inside. The only trace of him was a trail of black soot leading into the woods. From then on, no one doubted the stories again. Every evening, before darkness fell, they lit fires, prayed, and waited for dawn, for it was only the first rays of sunlight that could chase the nocturnals back into the cursed dark from where they came. In the Middle Ages, darkness was not just the absence of light. It was a realm of its own. After midnight, when even the church bells dared not ring, people whispered of beasts known as the night. They were neither human nor animal, but lost souls that crawled from forgotten graves. Shepherds told stories of seeing red eyes in the fields, low to the ground, moving faster than any man could run. Horses screamed without reason, dogs refused to bark, and children woke crying, saying something stood by their beds. Those who tried to follow the creature's tracks found only twisted prints, half human, half hoof. According to legend, the Nightburn were cursed, sinners, liars, murderers, and oathbreakers. Condemned to wander the earth until Judgment Day, they prowled in search of warmth, trying to steal it from the living. Villagers protected themselves by leaving a bowl of milk mixed with ash at their doors. It was said the creatures would stop to drink it, sparing the house for one night. But sometimes, even that wasn't enough. One winter, an entire family vanished, leaving behind a single mark burned into their wall. A circle of soot, drawn with a trembling hand. The priest said it was a warning. The Nightburn had found them between midnight and 3. The world belonged to no man. These were known as the cursed hours. The church taught that during this time, the boundary between the mortal and infernal realms grew thin. Spirits wandered freely, and demons whispered to those awake. In one monastery, Brother Aldrich defied the rule of silence and stayed awake to copy ancient scriptures. He believed that faith would protect him. But as the candles burned low, he heard footsteps echo through the empty halls. The air turned cold, and the ink in his pot froze. When he looked up, he saw a shadow standing behind him, tall, with eyes like empty pits. Aldrich prayed, but the figure spoke first. "Your words give me life." "Keep writing." When dawn came, the other monks found him still seated, his hands stiff, eyes open. On the parchment before him, written in trembling ink, was a single name, one that no man dared to read aloud. From that day, the monks sealed the library after sunset, and no prayer was spoken during the cursed hours again. They believed that even the holiest words could summon unholy things when darkness ruled the world. The plague had ended, but its ghosts remained. In the blackened villages of medieval Europe, people began hearing voices at night, soft, familiar whispers calling their names from outside. The frightened called them the whispers of the damned. It started with a widow named Isolda, who swore she heard her dead husband's voice beyond her door. "Open, my love," it said, gentle and broken. Against her better judgment, she did. At sunrise, her door was open, her bed untouched, and only her shoes were found in the mud, facing backward. Priests tried to bless the graves, but the voices grew stronger. They believed these were the souls of plague victims buried without rites, cursed to wander until someone listened. Villagers began covering mirrors and placing salt by their windows, hoping to keep the dead from entering. But even behind locked doors, the whispers came sometimes from the roof, sometimes from beneath the floor. They mimicked lost children, lovers, and mothers. The brave who followed them never returned, their names whispered next by the wind. To this day, Some say that if you walk an abandoned medieval graveyard at night, you can still hear those voices calling softly, waiting for someone foolish enough to answer. Fear ruled the medieval world. Fear of sin, fear of darkness, and most of all, fear of the unknown. From those fears, demons were born, and one, above all, haunted the nights. Incubus? They said it came while people slept, pressing on their chests, stealing their breath and souls. Victims woke paralyzed, unable to scream, as unseen claws traced their skin. Monks believed these demons entered through dreams, taking pleasure in human suffering. Some claimed Incubus appeared as a lover, beautiful, seductive, and deadly. A legend tells of Sir Roderick, a knight whose wife fell ill after claiming an angel visited her in sleep. One night, he hid and waited. At the hour past midnight, he saw a figure standing over her, pale, with black wings and eyes like fire. Roderick struck it with his sword, but when it vanished, his wife gasped once and fell lifeless. From that night on, he was never the same. His reflection showed not his face, but the burning eyes of the creature he had slain. They said he had become what he tried to destroy, a man cursed to walk between dreams and death. When the full moon rose above the cold stone villages of medieval Europe, people locked their doors and whispered prayers. They believed the moonlight did not only shine upon the living, it awakened what slept beneath the earth. These were the moon-born creatures of shadow that fed on fear and moonlight alike. Farmers spoke of seeing strange figures wandering the fields, pale as bone, their faces smooth, their limbs too long. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the moon like a mirror. The bravest knights who hunted them never returned.
But the villagers found their armor days later, twisted and melted as if burned by invisible fire.
An old healer once claimed to have captured one, a frail creature bound in chains of silver. But when she opened her door at dawn, only a pool of light remained, shimmering like water before fading away. The villagers burned her house, believing she had angered the moon itself. Every full moon thereafter, they buried silver coins in their doorways, praying to be spared.
And when the light fell across the hills,
they swore they could see figures dancing in the distance, the monsters of the moonlight, waiting for the next fool to gaze too long at their cursed glow. In the medieval era, night was not a void, it was alive. Men carried torches, not to see the path ahead, but to keep the shadows at bay. They said the darkness itself watched them, shifting just beyond the edge of the light. A chronicler from a mountain monastery wrote of the Watchers entities born from pure shadow, silent and hungry for warmth. Travelers described seeing their outlines, tall and thin, standing just beyond the firelight. When the flames burned low, the figures would take a step closer. One winter's night, a group of soldiers returning from war stopped in a clearing. They lit a great fire and laughed to mask their fear. But as midnight passed, one by one, their laughter died. Something stood behind them, tall shapes, faceless, moving in unison. By dawn, only the fire remained, surrounded by empty armor and frozen footprints, leading into nothing. To this day, Tailies warn, never let your torch die out in the wild. The shadows are patient. They wait for light to fade, for courage to fail. For once the darkness takes you, not even the sun can bring you back. In medieval times, church bells were sacred, rung to ward off storms, plagues, and spirits. But in the cursed village of Vernholt, the bells rang when no man pulled the rope. Always at midnight, always before someone died. The villagers believed it was the soul of Father Alaric, the priest who had broken his vows and taken a forbidden life. When his sin was discovered, he was sealed alive inside the bell tower. His body never recovered. From that night onward, the bells rang by themselves, and those who heard them would soon meet a strange and violent end. One evening, a young monk climbed the tower to stop the ringing. He never returned, but the next morning, the villagers found blood dripping from the bell's mouth. Inside, etched into the bronze, were claw marks and the faint outline of a man's hand. Even now, ruins of that tower remain. Travelers say, if you stand beneath the archway at midnight, you can still hear the faint toll of a distant bell calling out for the next soul to join its eternal choir. Long before lanterns and carriages, the roads of medieval Europe were ruled by darkness. Travelers spoke of the night watchers, ghostly figures that followed wanderers from the edge of the trees.
They never attacked, never spoke, but those who saw them always vanished before reaching their destination.
Merchants claimed to see torches flickering behind them, only to turn and find nothing but mist. Others described footsteps echoing in perfect rhythm with their own. Priests said the watchers were guardians of forbidden paths, spirits of the hanged, forever patrolling the roads where they died. One story tells of a knight named Tomas who set out at dusk, despite warnings. When morning came, his horse returned alone, eyes wide with terror. The villagers followed the trail and found Tomas's sword driven into the ground. His armor arranged beside it, but no body. Nearby, carved into a tree, were the words, "We walk beside you." To this day,
Wanderers leave coins at the crossroads and whisper prayers to the watchers.
for those who travel after sunset, know some footsteps on the road are not their own, far from the castles and cities. Medieval peasants lived surrounded by forests, deep, endless woods filled with eyes. They spoke of ancient beings older than Christianity, demons that predated man himself. These creatures, known as the Old Ones of the Earth, were said to live beneath the soil and roots, rising only when disturbed. Farmers who dug too deep found bones too large to be human. Those who built homes on sacred grounds suffered unexplainable curses, livestock born without eyes, wells filled with black water, children speaking in unknown tongues. The church declared it pagan superstition, but priests who visited never returned. One legend tells of
A nobleman who tried to drain a marsh for farmland.
he ordered his men to dig, but when they struck something solid, a red mist filled the air. That night, every man who had touched the ground was found dead. Their faces twisted in silent screams, their skin turned to stone. The land was abandoned, and centuries later, nothing grows there still. Villagers say the earth remembers. It hungers. And sometimes, on windless nights, the ground itself seems to breathe. There were nights in medieval Europe when even the priests dared not pray. The people called them the unholy nights. Those cursed evenings when the sky turned red and the wind fell silent. It was said that during these nights, the gates of hell creaked open just enough to let the lost souls wander among the living. Farmers barred their barns, monks sealed the chapel doors, and families huddled together, whispering verses from memory. But the demons were not kept out by words. They came as shadows, slipping through cracks, standing over sleeping children, breathing cold air into their dreams. In the village of Arden, a priest named Father Benouet tried to defy the curse.
On one such night,
He walked into the graveyard holding a cross of iron. Witnesses saw him raise it to the sky as thunder roared, and then the lightning struck. By morning, his cross was found melted, the earth blackened in a perfect circle around it. From then on, no bell was rung, no sermon spoken during the unholy nights. People knew that some darkness was not meant to be challenged, for when heaven turned its face away, the devils of the earth danced freely beneath the blood-red moon. In the Middle Ages, fire was life. Its glow kept beasts, thieves, and worse things away. But even the fire had its limits. Beyond its circle of light lay a world unseen. The peasants
called it the Edge of Fear, where monsters waited, invisible, but always watching.
Hunters returning late from the forest spoke of hearing soft breathing just beyond their campfires. Some said they saw pale figures moving at the corner of their vision, gone the moment they looked directly.
Others swore they heard their own names whispered from the dark, in voices that sounded too familiar.
One fateful night, a group of travelers decided to test the legend. They threw torches beyond the fire's edge, and for a brief moment, saw dozens of shapes crawling backward into the shadows. Horrified, they fled, but by morning, only 2 survived. Their hair turned white, their eyes unable to bear light again. From that night on, villagers kept their fires burning brighter and never dared to let them die before dawn. They said the darkness beyond the flames was alive, a patient thing, waiting for courage to falter. for one single step into its arms. Between midnight and 1, the villagers whispered. The witches danced. It was the witching hour, a time when spells were strongest, when demons walked beside mortals unseen. The church bells never rang during this hour, for even the clergy feared to disturb what roamed beneath the moon. In the forests near Toulouse, people often found strange symbols burned into trees, circles of ash, bones tied with hair, and stones arranged in spirals. Shepherds told of seeing women cloaked in black, chanting to the wind, their shadows moving though their feet did not. One winter, a baron captured one of these women. She was old, blind, and smiling. When asked who she served, she whispered, "He who comes when light sleeps." That night, the baron's castle burned to the ground. No one found her body, only her shackles melted into the floor. From then on, villagers refused to speak her name. They stayed indoors when the clock struck 12, for they believed the witching hour was not merely superstition, it was a door. And once opened, it could never be closed again. Before men built cities, they said the forests belonged to creatures that were neither beast nor god. Their eyes shone like lanterns in the night, watching from treetops, lakes, and the edges of dreams. By medieval times, few remembered their names, but all still feared their gaze. Travelers spoke of eyes glowing in the blackness, unblinking and countless. Those who looked back were found days later alive, but hollow, unable to speak, their pupils reflecting a faint, inhuman light. Priests called them the Touched. In one village, an old woman claimed she had seen the truth. The eyes, she said, were the guardians of nature's forgotten gods, angry that humans had stolen the land. That very night, the villagers found her house torn apart, the ground around it covered in strange clawed prints. No one dared to bury her remains. From then on, people averted their eyes at night. They covered windows and extinguished fires, knowing light only attracted attention. Because when the forgotten beasts looked upon you, you didn't just see darkness, darkness saw you back. Fear, the priests said, was the devil's first weapon and his most faithful servant. In the medieval world, people believed that fear itself could summon demons, giving form to what had none. These were known as the fear feeders, spirits invisible until you believed in them. It began with nightmares. People woke screaming, certain something had been sitting on their chest, whispering lies into their ears. Livestock died without wounds, children refused to sleep, and the scent of sulfur lingered in the air. The priests burned incense, but it only made the smell worse. A chronicler named Osric wrote that these demons grew stronger the more people feared them. Villages that spoke of them vanished within weeks, as if devoured by their own terror. In one ruined town, travelers found carvings of open mouths and staring eyes on every wall, as though the people had tried to warn others before they disappeared. To this day, ruins of those villages remain untouched. Locals refuse to enter, saying that fear still lives there, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to remember the stories. Because once you believe, they begin to believe in you, too. Long after sunset, when the fields turned black and silent, peasants dared not look outside. They believed their farmlands belonged to them only by day. At night, the earth belonged to the Dark Ones, demons said to rise from the soil itself, feeding on breath and warmth. It was said the ground moved where they walked, crops withering in their wake. Shepherds who guarded flocks at night sometimes vanished, leaving only scorched footprints in the grass. The elders claimed these creatures were souls of murderers buried without forgiveness, bound to wander until the earth swallowed them whole. One night, a desperate farmer stayed out late, trying to protect his dying fields. He saw shapes crawling between the rose-thin, black figures dragging long shadows. Their eyes glowed faintly red, and their mouths whispered his name in the voice of his dead wife. He ran, but by dawn, only his plow remained, bent and burned. The villagers left his farm untouched, calling it cursed. No one tilled that land again. Even centuries later, the soil there grows nothing. They say the demons still rise on moonless nights, walking the darkened fields, searching for those who disturb their restless sleep. The forests of medieval Europe were deep and endless and full of secrets. By day they seemed peaceful, but at night they became a world of their own. Villagers spoke of voices crying for help within the trees, voices of people long dead. They called it the forest's hunger. Those who entered after dusk were said to hear the screams first, distant at first, then closer, until they circled all around. Hunters told of seeing lights moving between the trunks, like lanterns carried by invisible hands. Some said they were fairies. Others swore they were souls of the damned, luring mortals deeper into the woods. A tale from the north tells of a woodcutter who followed the cries, thinking a child was lost. Days later, they found him kneeling before a hollow tree, his face frozen in terror. Inside the tree was a tunnel, carved deep into the earth, lined with hundreds of teeth. After that, the villagers built stone crosses along the forest's edge and burned incense before nightfall. But still, when the wind howls through the branches, it sounds like voices pleading, laughing, and sometimes screaming, as if the forest remembers everyone who entered but never came out. Far from the castles and cities, the countryside of medieval Europe was quiet by day, but alive with fear by night. Travelers reported strange lights moving through the fields, and farmers spoke of seeing entire processions of spirits crossing the hills. They called it the March of the Dead. Every year, on the coldest nights, these spectral armies appeared, silent at first, then growing louder, a thunder of footsteps with no bodies to match. Villagers hid inside, praying not to be seen. Those who peered through cracks in their doors said the spirits carried torches made of bone and faces twisted with agony. One farmer, driven by curiosity, dared to follow the sound. He vanished. Days later, his body was found in the churchyard, his feet burned as if he had walked through fire. The priest declared it the punishment for witnessing what no mortal should see. To this day, old roads in Europe bear strange, scorched lines across the ground, believed to be the path of the dead. And when the wind grows heavy and the night feels too long, the living still whisper their prayers, hoping the march will pass them by. In the Dark Ages, dawn was not a guarantee of safety. It was a desperate finish line. People believed that spirits grew most violent just before sunrise, unwilling to return to their graves. This hour was known as the time of morning shadows. Monks chronicled tales of candles snuffing themselves out in monasteries, of doors opening on their own, and of chanting voices echoing from empty corridors. It was said these were souls who had died unshriven, those who passed without confession, trapped between heaven and hell. In one abbey, Brother Lucas awoke early to ring the morning bell, but as he reached for the rope, he saw a pale figure standing in the courtyard, hands folded in prayer. Thinking it another monk, he called out, and the figure looked up. Its face was his own. The next morning, Lucas was found dead beside the bell rope, eyes open toward the dawn. The other monks sealed the courtyard forever, calling it cursed. Even now, when fog settles over old monasteries, locals swear they see figures praying in the mist, shadows that vanish with the first light of day, as though dawn itself is the only mercy they are allowed. Sleep, in medieval times, was not seen as rest, it was risk. The church warned that dreams were doors, and some doors opened both ways. Those who slept unblessed could wake with something else inside them. They called these nightmares the demon's sleep. Villagers spoke of waking to feel unseen hands upon them, of whispers in their ears telling them secrets no man should know. Healers called it the night sickness, but priests recognized it for what it was. A demon, feeding on the soul through dreams. A young woman named Elena was said to suffer nightly torment. She screamed in her sleep, her voice echoing like two people crying at once. The priest blessed her home, but each morning her eyes grew darker, her body weaker. One night, her father stayed awake to watch. As she slept, a shadow rose from her chest, a shape with wings of smoke and eyes of ash. When he shouted a prayer, it vanished, but Elena never awoke again. The church forbade people to sleep alone after that, claiming demons preyed on solitude. They said, if you dream and cannot wake, it is because something else has already taken your place.
Midnight in the Middle Ages was not an hour, it was a warning.
Villagers said that when the moon vanished behind the clouds, the world belonged to the unseen ones. They were monsters that no one could look upon and live. The legends began in the hills of northern France, where shepherds vanished without a sound. Their flocks were found untouched, but the grass around them was flattened, as though something massive had passed through. The people spoke of hearing footsteps, circling their homes at night, slow, deliberate, heavy as stone. One man claimed to have seen what others could not. He tied bells around his bedpost, hoping the sound would protect him. That night, the bells rang softly, one by one, as if invisible hands brushed them aside. The next morning, the man's body was found kneeling, his eyes gone, his face twisted in awe. The monks wrote that these beings were ancient remnants of creation, banished from sight. They existed only where no light touched. And so, the people learned to fear not what they could see, but what they could not, for sometimes the unseen watches closer than the visible ever could. In medieval villages, fire was sacred, the only thing that separated man from the night. But in the cursed valley of Miravel, even the flames betrayed them. They said that no matter how many torches they lit, the darkness always crept back, thick and alive. The first sign was the dimming of candles. Then came the whispers, soft, mocking laughter from somewhere just outside the light. When the villagers tried to build bonfires, the flames burned black, throwing shadows that moved on their own. A priest from a distant abbey was sent to investigate. He found the valley filled with smoke, but no wind carried it. Inside the church, he discovered candles burning upside down, wax dripping upward toward the ceiling. That night, he fled in terror, leaving his journal behind. In it, he wrote, "The darkness here is not absence, it is presence." Within a year, Miravel was abandoned. Nothing grows there now. Even on the brightest days, travelers say the shadows linger too long, and fires flicker for no reason, as if something unseen still breathes behind the light, waiting for night to return. Beneath every medieval church was a crypt, and beneath some crypts, something deeper. They called it the Abyss, a place where the dead were said to whisper through the stone. Priests forbade anyone to enter, warning that not all voices below belonged to souls seeking peace. In one monastery, the brothers began hearing murmurs during prayer. At first, they thought it was the echo of their own chants, until the whispers began answering them. Some monks claimed to hear their dead relatives. Others heard promises of knowledge and power. Soon, men began descending into the crypts, following the voices and never returning. Only one survivor, but Azama Sies, was found days later, crawling from the stairwell, blind and mumbling.
Before dying, he said, "They are not the dead."
They are the forgotten. The monastery was sealed and declared cursed. Yet travelers who rest near its ruins at night say they still hear faint voices rising from the ground, gentle, pleading, and always calling by name. The villagers warn, never answer. For what calls from below does not seek your company, it seeks your place. Possession was the terror of the medieval mind, the fear that one's own soul could be taken without warning. The church claimed only the pure could resist it. Yet even priests trembled when the screams began. In the town of Brindell, a girl named Mara became the talk of the village.
At night, her voice changed, deep, ancient, speaking in languages no one knew.
When holy water was poured upon her, it boiled. Crosses turned black in her presence. Yet when asked who she was, she smiled and said, "I am the silence between your prayers." Desperate, the villagers called for an exorcist. For 3 days, the church echoed with her screams. On the 4th, all fell silent. When the priest emerged, his hair had turned white, and his hands trembled. He said only one thing. She was not possessed.
She was returned. The villagers burned the church and fled.
Today, nothing stands there but stones and weeds. Travelers claim to hear her humming in the wind, a soft, human song that fades the moment you listen too closely. When the sun set over medieval lands, people locked themselves inside, for that was when the evil one walked. He wore no face and cast no shadow, but his arrival was always marked by the sudden silence of birds. It began in a village by the river, where every night one person disappeared. Doors were found open, food untouched, and faint footprints led into the water, as though the victims had walked willingly to their doom. The elders said it was a spirit of vengeance. Once a man burned unjustly for heresy, now cursed to wander between light and dark. One night, a soldier decided to confront the evil. He marked his door with holy ash and waited. At midnight, the air turned cold. The door opened. The soldier saw nothing, yet the shadow of his own body stretched toward him. He screamed once, and the light died. In the morning, his armor lay empty beside the river. Since then, villagers say the setting sun brings him back, a warning that evil does not always hide in darkness. Sometimes, it walks with the last light of day. Long before the church named its devils, there were older things, forgotten demons that the peasants whispered of only in secret. They had no names in Latin, only shapes in shadow and eyes, like burning coal. In the mountains of Bavaria, villagers spoke of the Graulich, a being that fed on despair. It would appear in times of famine, standing at the edge of the village, unseen, but felt its presence pressing against every heart, making the strong weak and the hopeful mad. One winter, when every crop failed, the villagers gathered in the chapel and prayed for dawn. But the priest, Father Lucien, vanished that night. His footprints led out of the church and stopped at the old stone well. When they pulled the rope, his body came up headfirst, his eyes wide open, his mouth frozen in a scream. Inside his throat, carved with something sharp, were the words, "We were never gone." After that, the people sealed the well and left. Centuries later, travelers say that when snow falls on that ground, it never melts, as if the earth still remembers the cold breath of something ancient, waiting to be remembered again. Every year, on the first frost of winter, medieval villagers believed the dead returned to visit the living. They called it the Night of the Dead. Candles were lit in every window to guide lost souls home. But if one candle blew out, it meant a spirit had entered. In 1349, during the Black Death, the village of Verdun decided to ignore the old ritual. So many had died that they refused to remember. That night, a fog thicker than smoke rolled in. The church bell rang by itself, and the villagers heard knocking on every door. Slow, polite, insistent.
Those who opened saw nothing but cold air.
Those who didn't open were found dead by morning, eyes wide, hands clutching their throats as though something had tried to pull them through the wood. When dawn came, the candles were all extinguished, every last one. The survivors fled, swearing that the fog carried faces, pale and sad, whispering,
"You forgot us." Now, even centuries later,
people who pass through Verdun on cold nights say the air feels heavier, and sometimes, when the wind blows, it sounds like hundreds of hands tapping faintly at unseen doors. The church claimed to have banished the old gods, but in the dark corners of medieval Europe, the villagers knew better. They spoke of things older than Christ, beings who demanded neither prayer nor sin, only fear. In a remote valley, a cross stood on a hill to mark holy ground. Yet every night, it turned east, facing the forest, instead of heaven. The priest blamed vandals, but each time it was set right. The next dawn, it twisted again. When the priest finally stayed awake to witness it, he saw the wood bend on its own, groaning like something alive. From the forest came a low hum, deep and rhythmic, like chanting from 1,000 unseen throats. He fled, clutching his rosary, whispering the Lord's Prayer, but the echoes followed him home. By morning, his skin bore strange symbols, burned into flesh like brands.
the villagers buried him with his face covered, afraid to look. They say the cross still turns at night.
And when lightning flashes across that hill, the shadow it casts is not of a man on a cross, but something with horns, smiling. The church promised protection from evil, Yet in the monasteries of medieval Europe, darkness found its home among the holy.
In the Abbey of St.
Vereen, the brothers began waking with bruises around their necks and ash under their fingernails.
At first, they blamed nightmares until Brother Eamon saw it. A figure dressed in a monk's robe, standing in the corner during prayer, its hood empty. It moved when they did not look directly at it and vanished when they turned. The abbot ordered a night of fasting and prayer, sealing the chapel. But by dawn, every candle was dead, and the abbot was gone. In his place lay his robe, folded neatly, with a single message written on parchment. Faith feeds us best. The monks fled, abandoning their vows. Those who passed the ruins later claimed that prayers whispered there were answered, but not by God. Sometimes, a voice would echo softly from the darkness, reciting scripture backward, as if mocking the faith that once believed it could not be touched.
In the darkest corners of the medieval mind, fear and faith were inseparable.
To fear was to believe. To believe was to survive. When the church could not explain the unholy, it sanctified it, turning terror into worship. In one remote village, a statue of the Virgin Mary began weeping black tears. Priests called it a miracle, but the tears burned holes in the stone floor. Still, the people knelt and prayed, their faith stronger than their doubt.
Then came the dreams, visions of a woman in a white veil, whispering promises of eternal life in exchange for silence.
Those who listened were found kneeling before the statue, unmoving, their skin pale as wax. The church eventually destroyed the shrine, calling it a deception of the devil.
But even today, the ground where it stood feels warm beneath the soil, as if something below still stirs.
Perhaps that was the true nature of medieval faith, a desperate need to find light, even when it burned in the fires of hell itself.